to the Curly Girl podcast. I'm your host, Lena. This is our first podcast here, so we're really excited, kind of relaunching, rebranding, doing a whole new thing. So what we're going to be talking about today is the 1619 Project and also critical race theory and what they are and also kind of what they aren't and how they're not really the same. The 1619 Project is a Pulitzer Prize winning collection of essays and writings that were published by the New York Times Magazine. The project was led by notable journalist Nikole Hanah-Jones. Nikole has been in the news because UNC offered her a position that should have had tenure, but because of some interference, she was not offered tenure. And after some back and forth and a lot of public discussions and discourse about it, they decided to offer her tenure, but being the wise woman that she is, Nikole chose to go where she is celebrated and not tolerated, and she turned down the position at UNC, which was her alma mater, and instead she chose to go to Howard, which I think is an excellent choice because we need to go to places, again, where we are celebrated. The purpose of the work was to put the legacy of slavery and the contribution of Black Americans at the center of U.S. history. And I think that should absolutely happen because Black history is American history. I'm a Black American, and the contributions that we have made and the things that we have endured and representing that in a truthful light is important. And so that's what that work did. That was the purpose of the 1619 Project. And it received a lot of acclaim. It also received a lot of criticism. But in the end, it was wildly popular and received a Pulitzer Prize. It's being translated in a lot of different ways. There is a book that's coming out, and they also created a classroom curriculum. And what the classroom curriculum was a selection of readings and activities that were created by the Pulitzer Center, and they did this to use as material to teach the 1619 concepts as they were developed. To my knowledge, this is taught as a high school course, but there is a perceived threat that this would trickle down to younger grades. So the way I see it is, for some, the mere thought of having a more robust discussion about American history is a problem. Most notably, Republican lawmakers have started to propose and pass legislation and build up grassroots efforts to limit the discussion of race and slavery in American classrooms. This ban has been supported at the federal level by the former disgrace of a president, Donald Trump, and Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton. Their argument is that these inclusive education efforts are revisionist and teach children to hate their country. Now, my opinion is this is a very white response to the 1619 Project. And I want you to chill out before you get upset and take offense. What I'm saying is the majority of minorities in this country are every day forced to take a very realistic view of who this country has been and who we will be. We are not afforded the luxury of being forced out of our ideal bubble when it comes to this country. We don't have the luxury of being in that bubble and then being forced out. This is just something that we experience every day, and we know the truth because we have ancestors too. Our stories may not be told in the books, but our families tell these stories, and so we know. So when I say that, I'm not surprised that the knee-jerk reaction of a lot of Americans, and especially white Americans, is anger and fear and the need to protect what white people have been comfortable with all this time. But as John Zimmerman, who is an education historian at the University of Pennsylvania, the Graduate School of Education, he says, we've had disputes over history in this country since the 1920s, and the dispute has been who gets included in the story. Over time, we've added more people to the story, but this is the first time that we're debating not just who should be included, but what does their inclusion do to the story. So in that sense, he says Republicans are right that the 1619 Project is a threat, but he feels it's a good threat. Now, when I hear that, that is just the idea that we are challenging, the idea that some of our leaders were flawless, or we are not ignoring some of the things that they did that just make them a complicated person. In my opinion, that makes them more like us because we're complicated. We do things sometimes that don't always go well with other people. We all have different views. And I think it just gives them it gives our history a more realistic feel instead of an idealistic feel. But let me go on, because there are certainly people who do not agree with what I'm saying. Banning this type of education has been what I see as the latest divisive talking point for the average Republican, certainly on TV and at school board meetings. After being deeply divided over the election and the false claims by President Trump and his support and instigation of the January 6th insurrection, the party was really divided. And what I see is they found a new red herring to bring this dysfunctional family back together. But instead of talking about the 1619 Project, they've kind of evolved the conversation to this new hot topic, which is critical race theory. While 1619 focused on telling U.S. history in a more honest and sometimes critical way, critical race theory is a little bit harder to nail down. Republicans love obscurity. They take to it like flies to a huge pile of crap. Because when things are not clearly defined and laid out in acceptable GOP-friendly language, the Republicans, and I give them credit for this, are very masterful at twisting and repackaging ideas for nightly Fox brainwashing. Programming. It's very ironic that they have a problem with what they see as revisionist history, even though it's factual, but they don't have a problem twisting ideas and realities that we all witness with our own eyes and try to gaslight us into believing that what we know isn't true. And honestly, that's the reason I have a problem with the Republican Party. I have a problem with hypocrisy. It's probably one of the biggest reasons that I really can't consider even being a Republican. If I didn't have a problem, pretending like I didn't say something 6 months ago, maybe I would be that Republican. But I'm not. I like the truth. I like facts. And so I'll just stay an independent. So back to critical race theory. What is it? We've already defined the 1619 Project. And I said it's different than critical race theory. So what is critical race theory, right? What is it? First of all, it's a theory. Unlike the 1619 Project and the curriculum that's based on the historical facts, a theory is different. A theory looks at events that occur and it tries to provide an explanation for those events. So in this case, critical race theory looks at the plight, the history, the abuse of Black Americans and others who are obviously non-white. And they look at that history in this country and say, why has this been acceptable in a country founded over 200 years ago and purports itself as the land of the free and the land of opportunity? In order to answer these questions, critical race theory has some basic precepts. But before I get into what they are, let's talk about what they aren't. It is not America is only the oppressors and the oppressed, as former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said. It is not that America is irredeemably racist, like Senator Tom Cotton said. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the fact that progress cannot be made and that we can't make ourselves a better country. In fact, I think most reasonable people can acknowledge that progress has taken place over the last 245 years in this country, America. However, what we have to acknowledge is that many of those changes have been hard fought and consistently challenged, even today. let's think about the voting bills that are going on right now, and even the protesting bills that are going on right now. When change did come to America, and change came for non-white people in America, there were a lot of bargains and hidden efforts to limit the effects of that change. When we study, why would they want to limit the progress of black people in America? There are certain conclusions that are inevitable according to critical race theory. For example, in an effort to allow integration but maintain the construct and religious belief of white superiority, racism was consciously or subconsciously weaved into the institutions of America. If this wasn't true, we wouldn't have the need for any of the legislative changes that have taken place as we strive to make America a more perfect union. So now that we know what it's not, let's talk about what it is. Number one, critical race theory recognizes the idea that race is not real. It's actually a social construction. Now, we'll get into theory and the varied applications of social construction in the future, but in this case, it's important to recognize that biologically, race just isn't real. Now, the idea of culture and tradition and things like that, yeah, that makes us different and that can be upheld. But race? That's just something that we made up to cause division, and it got embedded into society to maintain certain status quos. That's just what it is. The second concept about critical race theory acknowledges that racism is basically autonomous in society. That means that nobody really has to work and twist their mustache to keep it going. It's already there, and it works whether somebody is trying to keep it going or not. In today's society, we see this prevalently in the criminal justice system. Black people are 13% of the United States population. That's men and women. But 34% of the prison population in 2018 were black men. Now, a lot of this is due to targeting, to unfair sentencing laws, poverty, and a host of other issues that we're all aware of. It's not just that black men are the worst of the worst. No, there's a targeted prison industrial complex that makes its wages off of black male incarceration, aka the new slavery. Racism is something that you have to actively challenge when it's presented, because it's there and it's working whether somebody is purposely trying to do it or not. So when you see it, it's important to point it out. You can't just ignore it and it goes away. If anything, ignoring it will allow it to grow unless the systems behind it are challenged and reimagined. The third point about critical race theory challenges the notion of storytelling in this country. We all know the golden rule, right? He who has the gold makes the rules. You might have been thinking something different, because that's not the real golden rule, but it is an unspoken understanding that truth tellers know. So what are the stories that we tell ourselves as a country? When people and experiences are left out of the historical record, which has been the case, do we really get a full picture? Can we really make conclusions about who we've been and where we're going? No, of course not. And this is the main thing that the 1619 Project set out to address, to present a full picture to adolescents and adults for consideration, not indoctrination. How our children and adults process receiving both sides of the story is up to them. If they hear it and see it and decide there still has to be more work to continue to make this a more perfect nation, that's their choice. It's not up to Tom Cotton and Donald Trump. The things that I've explained today are the basic tenets of critical race theory. As a theory, there are some other things that have come and gone, are more and less relevant because we continue to evolve as a society. What I talked about today are some of the parts of critical race theory that have endured since it first popped up around the 1970s. Hopefully, I provided some clarity about the difference between CRT and the 1619 Project. Most notably, what they have in common is confronting what we tell ourselves about the history of our country. There are other important topics for conversation, and I can definitely see those things coming up in school settings. But I don't think that's what teachers are setting out to do. I think that's just the result of us being more informed, us having more access to media and social media, and our kids just being generally smarter than we were. So just be prepared for it. We're going to fumble when we talk about race in this country, but we got to do it. It's going to be uncomfortable, but we have to do it. So in fact, what I'm going to do is start a series on my page called, "Is this racist?" Leave me a question or comment below, and I'll give my thoughts on if something is racist. Now I'm going to be honest. Every black person is not going to agree with me, but I'm not afraid to give my answer and make a video about it. Like I said, we got to talk about it, right? You can also email me at the link in my bio. I would love for you to do this, especially if you're going to be including a video. But today, I hope I've shed some light and made it a little easier for you to understand and explain the difference between critical race theory and the 1619 Project. I will do another video on critical race theory, and specifically point number 3 regarding the storytelling of America, because I think it's really important that we get that part right. So until next time, please hit that thumbs up. Please leave a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And I want to thank you all for watching Curly Girl Politics. Until next time, slow down, listen, and vibrate higher. Peace.